All my life I heard Pap talk about ground cherries. He said when he was a boy, ground cherries grew alongside everybody's garden. And adults like to eat them, but he said mostly he remembered kids would snack on them as they worked in the garden or if they were just playing nearby. But people do make fruits and jams, and I've even heard of someone making salsa out of ground cherries. I've never done any of those, even though I like to eat them just straight off the vine. There's several varieties of ground cherries, and one of them I believe is native to North America. But people call them by different names, so if you're not familiar with the term ground cherries, maybe you've heard them called husk tomatoes, tomato plants, even gooseberries, which the gooseberry I'm familiar with grows on a bush, and it's more like a blueberry bush, like that would be, except the gooseberries are green, they stay green. And if you're lucky enough to have one growing wild near your place, that's great. We used to have one at Granny and Pap's, but it got cut down over the years, and it's no longer there. But ground cherries grow low to the ground, and as they grow, there's a little husk that grows outside the fruit. They look like Japanese lanterns, like the flower, if you've ever seen that. And then as the fruit ripens and the summer progresses, that little husk turns papery, and you can see through it kind of. And actually when they fall off the plant is how you know they're ripe. That's when they're ready to eat. And ground cherries, if you have one, they're self-sowers, so they'll just spread everywhere. That's why when Pap said they were around everybody's garden, well, once you have them established, they'll just keep coming back year after year after year. But they're not good to eat unless they're ripe. You have to wait for them to be ripe. One time years ago, I was filming a piece for a company outside of Knoxville, and it was about Appalachia, and they sent Bill Landry to talk to me. Well, if you're familiar with the Heartland series, if you've ever seen it, then you'll know who Bill Landry is. Anyway, we were over in Martins Creek in a big cornfield. It's actually a silage field, and we were walking around. They were just shooting B-roll, so it didn't matter what we were saying. And as we were walking around talking, he said, well, tell me about some plant or something, point to the ground, and act like you're telling me something. I said, well, right there's a ground cherry. That's a ground cherry. And he said, oh, what's that? I said, and they're edible later in the summer as they ripen. And he said, well, I'm going to try to eat one. And I said, well, I don't think I do that because it's not ripe yet. Well, he didn't listen to me, and he tried anyway. So it was really a comical sight trying to see him not make a face or not act like it tasted bad, because he was actually being filmed at the time, but he did not like it. He said, those are horrible. I said, well, yeah, you need to let it get ripe before you actually eat it, and then they're really good. As far as the taste of ground cherries, I've read just a variety of different descriptions when people talk about them. Some people say they taste like everything from citrus taste to pineapple. I'm not sure. I love the taste, but it's hard for me to describe. It's a sweet taste. Sweet is almost like as a fruit. It tastes fruity to me. I don't really get the pineapple note in it, maybe the citrus. More of a tomato taste, a sweet and a tomato taste to me. Anyway, they're really good. But about 10 years ago, one of my friends, Jim Cassida, he asked me if I'd ever heard of ground cherries. And I said, well, yeah, Pap's told me about them my whole life, but I've never eaten one or never even seen one that I know of. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll mail you a box. So he did. So a few days later, I just couldn't wait to get that box in the mail. Especially Jim had told me when you get the box, you can eat them, but the rest of them, throw them out in your garden, and from now on, you'll have ground cherries. So I was excited about that too. But so I got the box in the mail, and I opened it, and just when that first ground cherry rolled out into my hand, have you ever had a memory just all of a sudden come back? It's like so clear and sharp in one way, but kind of fuzzy in the other. It leaves you thinking, was that a memory or did I make that up, But as soon as I seen that little yellow ball in my hand, I had this memory come back. That I was a little girl, and I was in my big grandma's garden. So that was my Pap's grandmother, so my great-grandmother, big grandma's what we called her. And she was trying to get me to eat one of the ground cherries, and I wouldn't eat it, I don't think. I can't even really remember that part. But it was funny. I'd waited all my life to see, what Pap had told me about the ground cherries, and then Jim mailed me the box. But then it was like when I actually seen the little ground cherry in my hand, it brought back this memory that I had a memory about an experience with ground cherries that I just didn't know I had until I actually seen it, and that memory come bubbling up in my mind. Our minds are amazing like that, how it's like all these filing cabinets full of drawers with little memories and little taste and smells and different things in them, and then something will make one of them come to the surface. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video about ground cherries. I hope you'll leave a comment and tell me if you're familiar with them, and if you are, do you like them like me? Like, I'll just go out into the yard and get a handful and eat them. Every time I go out in the yard and they're ripe, I eat a handful of ground cherries. Corey and Katie and Matt, my husband and my kids, they don't really care for them, but I really love them. I've never made the jam or the salsa or the jelly that people talk about. I always think I want to, and I will. Next summer I'll do that, but I end up just eating them out of hand is the way I do it. But please leave me a comment and let me know what you think about the ground cherries. I hope you'll share this video with your friends and neighbors, but mostly I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.